Welcome to Demographica Live. My name is Jack Street. I am joined by Brett Lee.
Hello.
We had a whole US election special planned for today, but the government have announced that they'll be doing a briefing, probably on the announcement that a vaccine has passed the clinical trials with a 90% success rate created by Pfizer. The government's bought 30 million samples of the vaccine, and we assume that this is what the briefing is going to be about, how that's going to be rolled out, etc., etc. So we're waiting for the government to go live. We're going to throw that up as soon as they do, and we'll watch along and then have a little chat about that with you once it's finished. We'll be joined later on by George Holt and Rami Holtzman, and we'll be also going through the US election fallout. First of all, thank you so much to everybody that joined us for our US election coverage. We had an amazing time doing it. We're so pleased with how it went, and it was such an interesting election. Obviously, I'm sure you guys have all been following the fallout from what happened, and with bated breath. It's been a drawn out process, but obviously something that we predicted at the time.
Can you imagine if we'd said that we would have gone on for
until the result came in? Yeah, we would have been there. I think we finished about 5:30. Yeah. So thank you so much to everyone that watched. We're going to throw it over now to the government, who have just started their press conference.
This country and around the world this evening, people are asking themselves the same question about where we've got to in our fight against COVID, and that is, does the progress towards a vaccine that's been announced today mean that we are at the beginning of the end of our troubles? So let me set out our assessment. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has been tested on over 40,000 volunteers, and interim results suggest it is proving 90% effective at protecting people against the virus. But we haven't yet seen the full safety data, and these findings also need to be peer reviewed. So we've cleared one significant hurdle, but there are several more to go before we know the vaccine can be used. What I can say is that if and when this vaccine is approved, we in this country will be ready to start using it. Earlier this year, the UK government ordered 40 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, enough for about a third of the population, since you need 2 doses each. And that puts us towards the front of the international pack on a per capita basis. And I should add that we've ordered over 300 million doses from 5 other vaccine candidates as well. If the Pfizer vaccine passes all the rigorous safety checks and is proved to be effective, then we will.
All right, so we seem to be having a few problems putting the stream up. Essentially, what's being announced is that there is a vaccine. They're going to roll it out and see if it is successful. There'll be an NHS-wide vaccine program across the country. We'll see if we can get that up for everybody, but we'll just
of different types of vaccines.
We'll just see for the moment. Brett,
out the most effective way.
Obviously, there's going to be a protocol to this, and those that really need it are going to be the most vulnerable people, are going to be given the vaccine first.
And I'm going to.
There's been a lot of skepticism over how quickly a vaccine is going to arrive. What was your first reaction when you heard the news that there was going to be a vaccine?
For a long time,
I'm very skeptical still.
Really?
Bugle,
yeah,
scientific cavalry.
I mean, I'm quite surprised that they're announcing it. I can tell you, because I thought it was more of a that they were sort of giving.
It's up.
Okay, great.
But it's still some way off. We absolutely cannot rely on this news as a solution, and the biggest mistake we could make now would be to slacken our resolve at a critical moment, because on Friday, Sage reported that the R is above 1 in England, though that doesn't take account of the current national restrictions. Alas, the death figures are rising running at an average of 300 a day, sadly double where they were 24 days ago. The number of COVID patients in hospital has risen to from just over 10,000 2 weeks ago to nearly 13,000 on the 5th of November, and we're heading towards the levels of the previous peak. Irrespective of whether there is a vaccine on the way or not, we must continue to do everything possible right now to bring the R down. And that's why we hope and believe that mass testing will help. And our first pilot began in Liverpool on Friday in partnership with Liverpool City Council. We've tested thousands of people there, but there's still a lot more to do. So please, if you are in Liverpool, get yourself along to a testing centre. There are 19 at the moment, with more still to come. And the more people get tested, the better we can protect that great city and drive the disease down in Liverpool. So do it for your friends, for your relatives, for your community. And I want to thank the fantastic support of the Army, of the people of Liverpool, and Liverpool City Council, and we're now going further by sending out hundreds of thousands of rapid lateral flow tests to local authorities right across England, and also, of course, to the devolved administrations. We're working with universities to establish, as soon as possible, similar mass testing capacity for students up and down the country. But while we're making progress, this project is still in its infancy, and neither mass testing nor progress on vaccines, though they're both vital arrows in our epidemiological quiver. They're both part of the key parts of our fight against COVID. At the present time, they are no substitute for the national restrictions, the social distancing, hand hygiene, and all the rest. So now it's more important than ever to follow the rules. I know it's been a tough first weekend of these autumn restrictions, and I'm especially grateful to the Royal British Legion and all those who worked so hard to ensure that no virus would stop us yesterday from honouring the memory of those who gave their lives for our freedom. But we must get through this to the 2nd of December, when these measures expire, and we plan to move forward with a tiered approach. Remember the basics then: hands, face, space, and follow the rules, and that's how together we can protect the NHS, save lives, and get the virus back in its box. That is what we will do. Thank you. I'm now going to hand to Brigadier Fossey, who's going to talk about the unrivaled logistical expertise of the British Army that's helping to deliver mass testing to Liverpool. Over to you, Brigadier.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good evening, everyone. As the Prime Minister said, I am Brigadier Joe Fossey, and I'm coordinating the military support to mass testing in Liverpool. It is a privilege to be invited to help the great city of Liverpool in its hour of need. We're really pleased to be in the city and relish the opportunity to bring our unique planning skills, ability to respond quickly, and logistics know-how to increase the city's own testing capacity. Over 2,000 troops have answered the call to help Liverpool tackle COVID-19 by setting up a number of testing sites in the city. To date, we have established 19 sites, and we are working hard with the authorities to deliver more each day. I should point out that we are working in support of Liverpool City Council, the NHS Clinical Commissioning Group, and the Department for Health and Social Care to prove the concept of rapid testing. We are demonstrating partnership in action and are together in enhancing the city's ability to break the chains of transmission and helping to drive down the number of COVID cases. I want to take a moment to explain to viewers what it is that the military is doing. This is a lateral flow test. And these are the tests that we're using in Liverpool. They are very simple to use. you will all know what a swab looks like. You will be in an enclosed booth. All COVID controls will be in place. You put the swab in your mouth and then in your nose and give it back to the soldier who will complete the test. The new piece of equipment is this 2-inch bit of plastic. It is this lateral flow device that produces such a speedy result. I have taken one this morning to make sure I was COVID-free. The test returns results within the hour, without the need for it to be sent to a lab. You will receive a message by email or text with your result. These lateral flow tests offer the chance for more regular and rapid testing. Many of us have served on operations abroad. We know what makes an effective team. The Council, the NHS, the emergency services, and most importantly, the people of Liverpool have worked together to make an outstanding coalition. It is a privilege to work alongside them. We're extremely grateful for such a warm response, more so because so many soldiers come from the city region and are excited to be giving something back to their communities. For example, Lance Corporal Lee Johnson of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers has been out helping his community in Anfield, where today we set up a testing centre in the football stadium. Using his sign language skills, Trooper Jordan Turner of the King's Royal Hussars managed to translate the testing process for a deaf member of the community. And Sapper David Mackenzie of the Royal Engineers has gone from building hospitals for the United Nations in South Sudan to delivering test sites to safeguard the residents of Liverpool. So our message to the people of Liverpool is clear. We are set up and ready for you to come and get tested. Please do not hesitate. Make the most of this opportunity. What we are trialling now is a possible route out of lockdown and a way to get on with our lives. The armed forces have always answered the call in terms of crisis. COVID-19 poses many challenges and affects us all in many ways. But we in the military stand ready to serve our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier. I'm now going to go to Jonathan Van Tam just to say a little bit more about the vaccine from a scientific and medical point of view.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good evening. You will all have seen the news today, the announcement by Pfizer-BioNTech, and I have to say that this is really a very important scientific breakthrough. I'm certain of that. I want to first of all begin to thank people around the world, including here in the UK, who have been clinical trials volunteers. We would not be talking to you about the news today if there weren't volunteers who go into clinical trials to help us find cures and vaccines against this awful disease. And thank you also to the hundreds of thousands of unsung scientists in the vaccine industry who've worked around the clock and are still working around the clock trying to find yet further vaccines for the world. This is truly appreciated. So today's news is the first vaccine and the first step, and it is very exciting. But I want to explain to you a little bit more about what the next steps are and why right now the message is stand fast rather than get too overexcited about quite where we are. So we've seen today the results that show the effectiveness of the first vaccine. We haven't seen the detail of those, but we've seen the headline results. The next step is to see the safety data, and I imagine that that will come in the next few days. There have been 44,000 volunteers in the major trial being reported today. So 22,000 have had the vaccine. That's a lot of safety data, and we have to see that and understand it. Safety is every bit. In fact, I would say it's more important than vaccine effectiveness. And the arbiters of safety and effectiveness in this country are our MHRA, our regulatory body, and they are truly world class and they are robustly independent. And so it's for them in time to form their own judgments about this and future vaccines. They are the only people involved in that. Then, if we can get to a point where vaccines are beginning to be authorised for use in the UK, the next question is, well, who are we going to give them to? And here again, an independent body, the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, will guide the government on the priorities. And you will have seen on the JCVI website that they have already identified a preliminary priority list. It is preliminary because until that committee can see the full characteristics of each vaccine, that list cannot be finalised. And it has to take into account when vaccines are likely to arrive and what kind of conditions they need for deployment, because they all have different storage and delivery requirements. So that is work for the future. But what is already very clear from the JCVI work to date is that by far and away, age is the biggest priority for patients who most need the vaccines and need to get those vaccines first if they are safe and effective. And so you can expect that the theme of increasing age being the highest priority to be a theme that stays with us as we go on this journey. I'm hopeful, because of all that, but not yet certain, that we could begin to see some vaccine by Christmas. What I want to do now is talk about the slightly broader context of all of this. So
okay, so we've got Boris Johnson and Jonathan Van Tam preaching extreme caution there with the vaccine, but some good news finally coming out of the coronavirus crisis. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Brett, what did you make of that?
I mean, I'm very skeptically optimistic, I guess. Yeah. I don't want to get too excited, like they were saying, or jump to any conclusions. Yeah. And it I don't know, 10% of people didn't show signs of getting the vaccine, which is also still quite a large portion.
I think that's why they need to wait and see the results of the clinical trials, look at the peer review study. Obviously, they are preaching caution. Don't get too excited yet. This isn't, we're out. We're out the end of the tunnel, and no one needs to worry about COVID anymore. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, what people were talking about when saying if we go into another lockdown, we have to have a purpose. There has to be a purpose to us shutting down the country again, putting jobs at risk. All of that, obviously important stuff, reducing the cases, reducing the hospitalizations, reducing deaths. It's all very important. Lockdown doesn't come without cost, and we need to make sure that we use this time as wisely as possible. And I think this is the kind of thing that people have been talking about. 30 million vaccines bought. So I think, or was that correct?
I think it was 40.
40?
Yeah, I think it was 40 million.
So we're at the point where by Christmas, possibly, we're going to be able to roll out some vaccinations to people who are the most vulnerable in society. A bit of positive news, but as you say, preaching some caution going into this. And I think that was the overriding theme of this announcement. We've been expecting something for a little while now. And
I'm slightly more pleased about what they talked about, the testing that's going on in Liverpool at the moment.
So it was Brigadier Joe Fossey speaking about rapid testing that's being rolling out of that being supported by the British military. Something that, in my opinion, should have been done a long time ago. But it's good to see that starting to be rolled out now. Something that lots of other countries have got available. I've spoken about both Belgium and Germany on our podcast and on the live show before. So hopefully that continues to be effective.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like they're doing this now, doing the tests in Liverpool now in preparation for it to work nationwide once the lockdown has finished. So is
again,
good.
yeah, of course it is, and we need to see, these things starting to happen once we come out of lockdown, because as lots of people have said, the fear is we come out of this lockdown in the run up to Christmas, things get very, very busy indeed, and we see cases go up, hospitalizations go up, deaths go up again, and we just have to rinse and repeat the process, and that's not what we want to see. We need to get the test and trace system sorted, something that we've spent a lot of money on and at the moment doesn't work properly. We need to get, the track and trace system, we need to get testing down right for when we come out of lockdown, to ensure that people are, have the ability to be able to get on with their lives now, and sort of we need to work towards living with the virus. I was listening to the radio earlier, and you might have caught this as well. Some NHS workers, and a lot of talk going on at the moment, and rightly so, about how health workers can be supported, getting really, really fatigued at dealing with dealing with the virus. Not being paid enough for the kind of work that they're doing, and seeing the same cycles happen over and over again. Just living in this, you get one bed clear and somebody else comes in straight away, and it's just a rinse and repeat process. There's no slowing down whatsoever. Ridiculously long hours, and even if it's for them, and obviously saving lives is really important, but getting the virus under control so we can start to move on and live amongst, what has kind of become a really bizarre new normal. Everyone spoke about the new normal, didn't they, coming out of lockdown?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this progresses. I'll be interested to get George Holt's view on this, because obviously it's progression for the government, lots of pressure on them to get this virus, to get the virus under control, get all this stuff, start rolling this stuff out. So I think George is ready to come and join us. We'll get him in now. Please, if you've got any questions that you want us to answer, let us know. Also, liking the stream and sharing it does us a massive favor as well. So if you can do that, that'd be perfect. We're just going to be joined by George in a second. If the vaccine is successful, how soon do you think we could see people moving into sort of getting back to normal again?
Well, it depends how quickly I can roll it out, doesn't it? I mean, if they've bought, it was saying there was some statistics being thrown about in that live stream, of like, I think they were able to produce 1.4 billion by the end of next year. I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume that means worldwide, which isn't a huge amount considering the population of the Earth. So if we've already bought 40 million, that covers it covers more than half of our population. But it does make you wonder whether stuff like travel would be possible to other countries or not, or there's sort of an ethical thing.
Yeah, I think George has joined us now. George, can you hear us?
I do.
If you could put your video on, mate, that'd be perfect.
I will.
We've got a question just before we get into things, and see what you think about the vaccine rollout being announced sometime around Christmas or after Christmas. Ryan asks, do you think there'll be any kind of reckoning for politicians with a public inquiry based on the excessive numbers of errors or delays? Throw you in at the deep end, George. Do you think that's the sort of thing that might be necessary, or do you think that it's about moving on? And
well, first off, hello. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
And good evening. Thank you for the question. So you asked, will there be a reckoning of politicians? Well, obviously, look, it's a completely unprecedented situation, and people. Okay. Some mistakes were made, and I feel like we have to be somewhat tolerant of that. If they found mistakes, that's okay. We can learn from them. But if they find something else, like incompetence, that would be something more to act on.
So, do you think there will be an inquiry? Do you think there will be some?
There definitely will be. Yes. Yeah. It's important to go back and reflect on what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be, but whether there will be an inquiry or not, I'm not so sure. Go
I
ahead.
think it'll be impossible not to have one, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
mean, I hope so. I hope so. You know, I think that there needs to be transparency. There needs to be the holding of account to politicians over the decisions that were made. And I think it's the way that those decisions have been made more than anything. We've discussed this, Brett, a little bit before, and we've always said everyone knew that this was a new situation, that there were going to be mistakes, and it was how the open the government were to the possibility of that happening and how quickly they moved on with dealing with those mistakes. And that's been the biggest frustration for me, is that there hasn't been enough openness to say, okay, look, we're going to botch things up every now and then, and we're going to act really fast to reconcile the mistakes that we do make. And that's why I think that people will want to hold some kind of inquiry over things like test, track and trace, the amount of money that has been wasted, the kind of the PPE procurement scandal that's going on at the moment that the Byline Times have covered so brilliantly. Lots of money has been wasted over this, and it has, I think, highlighted lots of ineptitudes in our system, would be a nice way of putting it. And being able to sit down with a fine-tooth comb after this is all over and really going through that is something that I think needs to happen. I don't know what you think, Brett.
No, I agree. It does slightly concern me. 'Cause my first thought when they talked about a new vaccine would be that if best case scenario, the virus does start to get defeated, or we don't see as many cases as much next year, that these mistakes that have been made and the money that's been spent on all these different scandals that have happened, it worries me that it'll be forgotten about. Sorry,
Yeah.
that it won't necessarily, because it's behind us. The line will be, we've defeated it. Let's now move on.
Yeah, there definitely could be a bit of that. But today there's been a bit of good news. You know, we can all get excited about the possibility of a vaccine and about testing in Liverpool, rapid testing in Liverpool being rolled out more and more, and hopefully we can see that at the end of the lockdown. George, did you manage to catch any of the press conference at all?
I saw a small summary. I've literally just finished work, but
We
so,
appreciate you
well,
joining us so quickly as well.
no, it's okay. So it seems to be an advancement on the situation in Liverpool, which is great. So we can see how rapid testing will work, and obviously, as you said earlier, the news with the vaccine is good. Obviously, don't take it all for granted right now. It's still in the trial phase. It works about 90% of the time, but
Yeah.
it's obviously a great place to start, and I hope it gives a lot of people hope. I know a lot of people don't have that right now, and hopefully this is the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think this is the frustrating thing about the entire virus, has been the fatigue that's come with, having to lock down again, and not really knowing when it's going to finish. A lot of people, I think, feel, I do, as much as we can see how much it's impacted so many people across the UK, I think a lot of people still feeling like, I kind of want to get on with my life and, go about my daily business, and don't see it impacting me directly, which is obviously not a reason as to take no precautions. But at the same time, it's understandable why people can feel that way, and we need a bit of a timeline as to how we're going to come out of this, I think, don't we?
Yeah, of course. When you take, go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say, the important thing to remember would be that a vaccination doesn't mean that it's suddenly over. That,
of course,
it's going to take time to roll that out.
Yeah,
and they've got to come up with some sort of potentially a priority list to roll out as well, which is going to be a very difficult thing. People might start to feel cheated if they're not as help as they expected to be. So yeah,
they have done, actually. They've been quite transparent with how it will be rolled out.
Most vulnerable first.
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so it's Gabe, I don't know if you've got the list to hand, but it's,
I don't.
Oh no, I was just asking Gabe, our editor producer. It's those in care homes and those that work in care homes, NHS frontline workers, and most vulnerable elderly people, and then it essentially goes by age.
Yeah.
And so, people like us, will be the last people that will get it. Rightly so, of course. You need to be rolling it out to the most vulnerable in society. And a point that I saw made on Twitter by our podcast guest this week, Lauren, who was saying that a group that have been majorly forgotten, and there was a lot of emphasis on those that are shielding, especially elderly people and those in care homes that are shielding. Now is the time to say to those people, you're really in the front of our thoughts. We're going to do everything that we can to ensure that you don't have to live like this anymore. You're not forgotten. Those that are in care homes, you're not being forgotten. Who have really had to deal with the brunt of this when a lot of us have been lucky enough to be safe in our own homes. And we can put the most vulnerable people in society at the forefront of dealing with the virus now. So, yeah, I think let's be optimistic, let's be cautious, and of course, we'll all preach, hold the government to account as and when this thing gets rolled out. Let's try and see. Hopefully, we get to see testing, at least the fast or the rapid testing be rolled out nationwide by the end of the lockdown, and then we can hopefully move on from there. So let's get to the juicy US election stuff. George, I know that you've got a lot to say about this. It's been a crazy it's been a crazy few days after the election, following it over the weekend, wondering when we were going to get a definitive result. Just to bring everybody up to speed, if you haven't been following what happened, President-elect Joe Biden won the election. It was called finally, I think, on Saturday, yeah. And at the moment, as it stands, Joe Biden has 279 electoral votes. Pennsylvania was called, which pushed him over the 270 to win mark. Donald Trump with 214 electoral votes, which leaves the total number of votes 75.4 million, which is 50% of the total votes to Joe Biden, and 71.1 million to Donald Trump. An incredible voter turnout. Pretty dramatic election as the night rolled on. Some people, especially Joe Biden supporters, getting pretty nervous as the results started to come through around 2-3 o'clock in the morning. George, what are your give us an overview of what your thoughts are, sort of what they were throughout the night, what you're thinking now of how the election unfolded.
Tired.
Yeah.
So, well, when obviously I did the election live stream with you the night before.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us for that as well.
After that, I sat for a little bit of the coverage, saw them all come in, and then went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night that night, I think around 3 or 4 a.m., possibly later, and I saw that Florida had been called for Trump. I was like, oh, this is interesting, because I remember Florida was pretty firmly in the Biden column for a lot of people. And I woke up after that just in time for Donald Trump's very, very worrying speech, in my opinion. Yeah. And I saw the election map as it was called so far, and in my mind just went, what the hell is that? I had never seen a weirder map at that time. So at the time I saw the map, Trump was leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and he'd already taken Florida, and Nevada was leading for Biden, and Fox News had recently called Arizona, and I was like, what is going on here? He's taken Arizona, but looks like he's struggling in these other states. This is very, very unusual. But as we saw in when we did the original live stream talk about it, one of the things I think we all agreed on was that it was going to be that the Rust Belt of states, Wisconsin, Michigan, especially Pennsylvania, which would be the key states of selection. And obviously, once Joe Biden was called for Pennsylvania, he won the presidency. So I think I think a lot of people were proved right when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we certainly were. I know we probably don't want to gloat too much, but our predictions were pretty spot on. When a lot of people were predicting the result was going to be a Biden landslide. Yeah,
I don't think people. So it's just one thing I want to shoehorn in here. Obviously Biden won, like they predicted, but obviously people predicted a Biden landslide. I don't think people are going to be trusting mainstream pollsters for a very long time to come.
I agree, but it was similar to the 2016 election, and this is something you pointed out on our coverage actually, that when you looked at the polls nationally, they were pretty spot on. When you took like an average a polling average, they were pretty spot on, and that's what I based my
But the state-based polls,
no, yeah, completely wrong. Yeah, but that's what I based my my prediction map on. We spoke about the I can't remember what you called it, maybe the Trump factor or something like that, giving a 0.2 +2 or +4
2.5.
or yeah, to Donald Trump in every poll that you saw, and then going from there, preaching caution at every turn. Lots of people didn't. Lots of people got carried away. The idea, I think, that Texas was going to go blue, it was
No
just
chance.
so
Well,
absurd.
not yet.
Do you think it
But-
will then? Because the thing is, for me, and this is something that I wanted to raise with you, was what do you think are the takeaways for the Democratic Party after this election? They lost votes in demographics where they really should be targeting, and in areas where they really should be targeting, or previously they've done very well. There's been these massive demographic shifts across the US. So take the Latino vote, for example, or even the vote among black males. Trump gained in those areas. That's pretty worrying, I think, still for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so I was going to comment here and say that yes, the Democrats won the election, but they're by no means safe at all, and they're in serious danger when it comes for 2024. Trumpism, as we may call it, isn't dead nor properly and entirely rejected. It was just that small column of undecided voters which gave him the edge back in 2016, and also the people who didn't turn out in 2016 because they didn't like Hillary Clinton had gone back to Biden. And I think that was something to do with wanting to return to normality, essentially, to as some people have said, make politics boring again. But I did dig a bit deeper into these results actually, and I can see that in other areas Republicans did fairly well. It was just that Joe Biden took the presidency over Donald Trump. So as you can see, the Republicans are most likely going to be keeping the Senate because the Georgia runoff elections are going to be in January, and they'll most likely take those seats. So the most likely scenario is going to be a Joe Biden Democrat presidency, but with a Republican Senate, which is going to be quite interesting to see because when historically when presidents come into office, they have they have the wave on their side, that they come in with all of Congress on their side, and then they've got pretty much 2 years to jam through as much as they possibly can. And Joe Biden isn't going to have that most likely.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very interesting. But you can see let's look at
so just quickly to jump in there, and based on that Joe Biden presidency, but maybe struggling to pass anything based on those Georgia runoffs in the Senate, and if the Democrat candidates win the runoffs, the 2 runoffs that are occurring, it will be a draw, and the deciding vote is the vice president.
Kamala Harris, yes.
Yeah, Kamala Harris, exactly. So let's assume that, and I think this is probably quite likely, that Joe Biden does, the Democrat candidates don't win that, and that the Senate goes to the Republicans. What do you think that means for the way that he's going to be able to govern, and what that then in turn would mean for both the 2022 races and the 2024 election?
That's a great question, Jack, actually.
Thanks.
So, as much as I would love to see Kamala Harris going into the Senate every single time there's a vote and to cast down that vote, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Republicans will take at least one of those seats. So, if you ask the question, what does this mean? I suppose the Democrats are a bit lucky right now that they've got Joe Biden, and he's got such a long history of being able to reach across the aisle and work with the Republicans to be able to get stuff done, and that's quite good for them because it enables them to still be able to get some legislation through because he'll be able to work with those more moderate Republicans. But what I thought was quite interesting, I think it was yesterday, the famous left-wing House member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out and pretty much said, "We don't want you working with Republicans. It is time to pursue a trying to pursue a very left-wing progressive agenda. And if he finds himself where he's being tugged on the left by people like AOC and he's being tugged on the right by the Republican Senate, he's going to be a bit of a lame duck, in my opinion.
So I think we might disagree here. I think he needs to move and try and pursue more left-wing progressive policy ideas if the Democrat Party are going to succeed in 2024. I think governing from the middle of the road, working really, really closely with the Republican Party to pass some, he might be able to get some stuff done on climate. He's going to struggle to get anything else in his agenda done, really. He might be able to pass sort of a living wage, possibly, but even that would be a struggle. If he's to win in 2024 and win votes in demographics that the Democrats didn't strike a chord with at all in the last election, he needs to pass some policy that's actually going to impact people's lives in a positive way. If he doesn't do that, and a Trumpist candidate comes along in 2024, the Democrats will have the floor wiped with them.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think it's likely that Joe Biden will run in 2024. I can't imagine.
So even if it's Kamala Harris.
Yeah, or Kamala Harris or a different Democrat.
I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, they're going to have to try and carry his torch. So the problem is, yes, you say he should go for a progressive agenda, but it won't pass. He's going to be dealing with a Republican Senate. Like, he won't be able to get a lot done. Like that Republican Senate will be able to hold him to so much. They wield a lot of power. He's a president who's promised quite a lot, so they could milk a lot out of him.
There's still some stuff to that he can pass. You know, it's not like the president has absolutely no power in the US. He's probably going to get them back in the Iran deal, which would be great. Probably going to get them back in the Paris.
Those things will definitely happen. But when you mention things that directly affect people in America, those two aren't one of them, really.
But they're going to have to try and do something on that, or they're going to have to try. But if they don't try and get some kind of progressive legislation passed, they don't have the opportunity in 2024 then to point the finger at the Republican Party and go, we tried to pass this. We tried to get this over the line for you to improve the lives of American people, to do something on healthcare, to do something on wages, to do something on infrastructure. And we were stopped by the Trumpist Republican Party. If they don't do that and they work really closely with Republicans and they do these kind of across the aisle deals, they're really going to, I do think they're really going to struggle. And you have to stand for something in an election. 2/3 of people voted based on their opinion of Donald Trump. That was massive. Donald Trump's ability to govern properly and save lives. The economy was massive. There's currently a recession on. There's going to be probably the worst recession on record in recent history that Donald Trump has presided over. People in America are truly struggling. They wanted Donald Trump out. But there are also large parts of the country that really didn't care about that stuff. And the Democrats are going to have to find a way to appeal to those people in some way, shape or form, I think.
Well, I suppose the question is, do you think Joe Biden is the sort of person to purposely not get through his agenda and lose,
No.
and so he can win later on, or do you think he's the person who will try and work the Republicans and get something done?
Yeah, I think
he's the latter.
I agree. I agree. So, just before we bring Remy in, I wanted to know what you think about what this means for the special relationship between the UK and the USA. Do you think that this appointment is something that pro-Brexit Brexit supporters in this country should be excited about? Does this worry you in terms of a trade deal, a post-Brexit trade deal? What are your thoughts on that?
Almost too early to tell, in my opinion. Obviously, the Democrats and the Tories don't normally always align, but as you can see, there was a good relationship between Obama and David Cameron at the time. So it can work, and it does, and it's certainly capable of working. You can see Boris Johnson has found areas where he can work with Joe Biden, such as climate change, where he's working to collaborate with him on COP26 and also on security services. He wants to collaborate closely there. But as I said on the live stream earlier, we might have this problem where obviously Joe Biden may feel he has got more loyalty to the EU. But to be honest, I would hope he would respect the special relationship. The UK Prime Minister and US President have worked together for well over 100 years now to accomplish many good things across the world, and I'd hope to keep that going.
Yeah. I mean, a lot's been said about some of Boris Johnson's comments in the past about Barack Obama. That the Biden camp haven't forgotten about that. That there's maybe some animosity. For those of you that don't know, Boris Johnson claimed that Barack Obama removed a bust of Winston Churchill from the Oval Office due to his part Kenyan heritage and ancestral dislike of the British Empire. Doesn't do a lot of good things for a lot of doesn't say a lot about the special relationship, does it?
Yeah, it's certainly not a great start, but I hope that they can sort of put that past behind them and get on with it. To be honest, I think Joe Biden probably has his heart in the right place and be willing to work with the UK.
Brett, have you got any thoughts about this before we swap you out for Rami?
Not particularly. No.
Are you sort of optimistic about a Biden presidency?
Yeah, I don't know about optimistic. No, I think I'm just waiting to see what happens. But I don't think it bodes particularly well if the Republicans have control of the Senate, and especially if he has trouble with the sort of left-leaning side of the party, the left-leaning side of the party.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Taylor in our chat has asked, are we therefore looking at an internal split with the Democrats, similar to Labour in the UK, Corbynism and the centrist wing of the party?
Yeah, you can have this problem where you've got the hard left tugging at Biden to do more progressive things, but he literally can't do that. He won't be able to get anything done. And Joe Biden is a sort of person who'd want to get things done now. So, and as you said in the previous live stream, he wants to have a legacy. He wants to be able to do something whilst he's in office. And if he's not running for re-election, he's going to want to get these things done now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know whether it's fair to characterize the Bernie wing of the party as the hard left necessarily, but I see where you're coming from. I see what you mean.
Hard left compared to everyone else.
For in the US, I suppose. I mean, basically what they're asking for is a minimum wage and healthcare. But yeah, I see where you're coming from, and I do think that there's going to be, a struggle for power there. Brett, thanks for joining us, mate. Appreciate your time. Rami, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Do I just put on your video for us? That'd be great.
Smiling away there.
Perfect. What are your thoughts been on the how the election unfolded in the end?
If you want the short form or
if you
the long
if you can condense it as much as possible.
Okay, short form. I think this is a very good result for the Republicans. I think this is a horrendous disappointment for Democrats and the more progressive socialist Democrats. To Biden himself, I think this is a big upset that really was not expected.
Did you think it was at all realistic that the Democrats were going to win any kind of a landslide? Because I mean, I don't want to bring up your prediction too much, just because of
it was wrong.
Yeah, basically.
For context, I know what your prediction was.
To be honest, I was expecting it to be pretty close, but I was expecting Trump to pretty much hold the majority of the states he won, because I was kind of looking at the less kind of more on polls and more on kind of Trump's actual policies on what he had actually done to the kind of key states in terms of employment and job creation, that kind of side of things. But I think I severely underestimated the impact that COVID had on the electoral votes.
Yeah, I thought it'd be close too.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever realistic necessarily to think that there was going to be any kind of, as we just said, Democratic landslide. I don't think Joe Biden offered enough in the way of policy or substance. The message that they were going to take back the soul of the nation, whilst it may have increased voter turnout a little bit, shining the light on Donald Trump and his inability to govern like a normal person. Was probably a fairly good tactic to take, but you have to offer something in return. You have to offer something in response, and I think unless you do that, and like I think you'll predict in the next election, if they don't do that next time round, they're going to struggle to pick up any kind of votes, especially if a Trump-esque candidate runs. I wanted
Yeah.
to. Sorry.
So, go ahead. Sorry. So
No,
sitting
go
back
ahead.
now, you can see his strategy was to sort of sit back, make sure we get that turnout in the areas where Hillary didn't, and I hope everyone else sort of votes against Trump. Really, he let it become a referendum on Donald Trump, and
Yeah.
that worked out really well for them. But I just thought it was worth calling out. You mentioned earlier it was a terrible result for Democrats, and I actually quite agree with you. Obviously, that they've won the presidency, but at a bit of a cost, really here. So if you look at what's happened locally, so Wisconsin, the Republicans held on to the local legislature there. In Arizona, they held on to the local legislature there. But of course, Democrats at the Senate seat. Georgia, the Republicans held on to the local legislature there, and the Senate's gone to a runoff. And Alabama, where Doug Jones won the previous time round, it's now been taken back by Republicans. So yeah,
I mean,
it's certainly a
I
bleak picture for the future.
I honestly cannot see the runoffs in Georgia going Democrat. I mean, people are saying it,
No chance.
but I think the only reason why we went blue this election was because of it was a vote for Trump out. But I think once we've got a couple of months under our belt, people will vote will strongly vote for the Republicans again. I mean, it's been a great turnout for Republican women. Republican women's, I think, I've added 13 congresswomen to the House, which has been, I think, a near record for the GOP. So that's been a great turnout for them. Obviously, they're holding on to the Senate by the looks of it. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be the first president in 32 years elected to not have control of Congress going in. So this is pretty much game over for Biden anyway. Before we've even started, I mean the way checks and balances are set up in the states, he's unable to get most of his progressive executives in. There was talks of what was it, Warren for Treasury Secretary, which I cannot see going through in any shape, way, or form. There was hopes for the more socialist and progressives like AOC and the Squad were trying to push for DC statehood, and also what was the other policy? One sec. Statehood and packing the court. That was it. Packing the Supreme Court. So those two main policies that were going to be the cornerstone of it. The Green New Deal and all these big progressive expansions of tax and government, definitely going down the drain for sure.
Yeah, what do you think? Sorry, what do you think that the Democrats should try and do in the next 4 years in terms of from a strategy point of view to try and work back some support in those communities that they lost out on so badly in this election? Obviously, it's difficult. It's weird to have this conversation on the backdrop of Joe Biden winning the popular vote by the greatest ever margin of any president has ever got. It's a strange conversation to be having, but you have to put it into perspective, I think, and look over the next 4 years. They will struggle, and what do you think they have to do to try and claw back some of that support?
I think we've seen a big shift in some of the demographics for sure. I mean, this is going to be the GOP's best support in minority votes since 1960, with about kind of polls suggesting about 26% share of minorities. I think one of those big groups is obviously the Latino vote. I mean, if we have a look at Miami-Dade, which was polling, which I think had a margin of about 29% for Hillary in 2016, was cut down to 7%. The Latino support was absolutely massive for Trump. So I think this is a clear indication that left-wing socialist policies are definitely not policies that America can agree with.
They weren't. Can I get a word in here about that? Because he's hit the nail on the head, where a lot of Latinos in Florida just felt really uncomfortable with a lot of left-wing policies that were coming out of the Biden camp, and the Trump campaign really managed to capitalize on that, running ads calling him a socialist. Really scared a lot of people off voting for Biden.
You two cannot seriously believe that Joe Biden is a socialist, or anything that was encompassed in the policy platform of the Democratic Party was in any way socialist. You can't actually believe that, can you?
I think it's moving there, though. It is moving there. A lot of the policies that they want to introduce will slowly move towards that, I think.
What examples are there of that?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is going to be public healthcare, Medicare for all. That is probably one of the biggest examples.
Every other developed country in the world has a Medicare for all-esque system. The USA is the only.
It still scares Americans, but
it polls so highly. When you look at the polling issue for issue, the United States of America is a left-wing country. When you look at
not for the swing voters.
Overwhelmingly in favour of Medicare for all, even swing voters, especially swing voters who are from working class backgrounds, minority communities that have a lack of opportunities, are overwhelmingly in favour of things like Medicare for all.
Why do they vote against it?
Because the Biden camp doesn't support Medicare for all.
Exactly, because they know it's they know they'll be shooting themselves in the foot.
But we're talking about how they aren't appealing to these demographics. If you support a policy that demographic supports, you are surely going to win their support. Biden ran, like we said, on a referendum on Trump. He didn't run on a policy platform.
But the Democrats would simply have to ask themselves, do we think we'll win over Republicans by supporting Medicare for all? And they probably won't.
But they don't have to necessarily. We're not talking about strong, staunch Republican voters, that 30% of the country that will 100% vote for Trump or the Republicans. We're talking about these swing voters that care about something really being offered to them that's going to make their life better, that's going to improve their life. Things like being able, not having to pay 20 grand when you break your arm for an ambulance, being able to, have affordable healthcare, being able to do a job where you get paid an actual, a living wage. Things like this that appeal to those.
Maybe later, but it's something, of course, I'm in favour of. We have it here in the UK, but over in the US, American politics isn't ready for it. Ready for that yet. It's edging towards there. Any party that feels like they could probably grasp onto that feels like it will make them lose the election. Trump won on a anti-Obamacare platform.
And he won by promoting bringing back infrastructure to the US. Promoting American jobs, bringing jobs back to those communities that have been so disproportionately affected, draining the elites from Washington DC. These things that you would see in an AOC, get rid of corruption, things that you would see on a Bernie AOC platform. He governed like Mitt Romney, which is probably why he hasn't won re-election. If he did half of the things that he promised he was going to do in the first place.
You can see on, I've got this helpful map here which shows me the swinging votes. You can see his base really did turn out for him this time round. You can see places such as Texas, one of the bigger reasons why they didn't. A lot of Republicans really turned out for him in Texas. A lot of Republicans really turned out for him in Utah, in Idaho, and more states. Like in Middle America, people still turned out for Donald Trump. It was just that it was those undecided voters in those critical states which flipped against him.
So, but you have to appeal to those undecided voters.
Exactly, and what's seen as a far left policy over there wouldn't do that, in my opinion.
But I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to jump in quickly.
Sure.
I was reading an article today, and there are a lot of Democrats in Congress who have been calling out the progressive and the socialist policies that the Democrats have been pushing forward. And there are many moderate Democrats in Congress that have been saying that the Democrat message of the left has been hurting their own image. So there's a lot of discontent within their own party as well, with some Democrats even saying on a call after the election that the word socialist and socialism should never be mentioned again in the party.
Yeah, in my mind, that reflects that the non-aggression treaty that was put together for the election has pretty much just fallen apart now. But now Joe Biden's got the presidency. Now there's a Democrat in the White House. I think the Democratic Party is going to be an all-out war with itself, with the hard left of the party attacking the right of the party and vice versa, to try and win over control of Joe Biden.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I do agree with you on that. I think the place that we disagree is on what direction, from a policy platform point of view, the party needs to go in. I don't think they'll win an election in 2024 by preaching the same stuff as they did in this election.
Is it okay sorry, if okay if I shorten that for you, I don't think they'll win the election in 2024.
Yeah, fair enough. But the Republicans, it doesn't matter who is put as the Democrat nominee in 2024. The Republicans will call them a socialist. and that will stick amongst some communities. It will, 100% it will, because it's a dirty word in US politics. So you have to cut through it with something tangible. You have to appeal to voters and get past that socialist argument that gets put against you. You have to win the argument, to coin a phrase, on things like a minimum wage, Medicare for all, drug legalization, infrastructure, jobs, all this stuff. You have to put forward an argument, healthcare. You have to put forward an argument on that stuff. Otherwise, what do you stand for?
Just coming in quickly, I mean, legalization of drugs has nothing to do with socialism.
Neither do most of these policies, Rami. Really, if we're truthful, none of these policies really have anything to do with socialism.
A lot of not socialism necessarily, but definitely taking control of government spending, increased tax dollars, more control. Basically, that's what it comes down to: more control, less freedom, individual freedom, gun rights. All of these kind of policies. Gun rights are a massive issue, and the Democrats and some of the Democrats have been pushing strongly against banning assault rifles and other issues with gun rights.
But again, when you look at the polling on an issue-to-issue basis, most Americans agree with banning assault-style weapons. So it's all well and good saying, the Republican Party is just going to slander you, but you have to stand for something. You have to pick something and say, I'm going to believe in this. This is what we're for. You can't run on this sort of flimsy message. Biden, for example, raised all of his tax raises that were going to cover things like his infrastructure plan, his healthcare plan, and his COVID response were tax increases on those who earn over $400,000 a year. Overwhelmingly popular with the US people, and he's just won the most votes of any candidate in history.
Which is still going to have an impact on the 99% as well. I mean, there have been studies by economists saying that his tax policies will have a negative income on post-tax income for those in the 99% as well, and an effect on GDP and job losses in the long run.
I think it's worth pointing out, Jack, that you're completely correct. That he won so many votes, but as you remember, it was also a very, very close election. Popular vote, sure. Unfortunately, isn't that important in the States, and the democratic setup of the United States doesn't mean that it's about winning the most votes. It's about winning a certain type of voter in key states to be able to pull off a victory. So most policies end up being very, very targeted to those people, which means that they have to be quite centrist, and they can't afford to be too radical. Like things like banning assault rifles completely is something that isn't very popular. It isn't something popular with that sort of demographic in the United States. So let's look back at the Democratic primary all the way last year ago now, which is crazy. And you have Beto O'Rourke, who came out and said, "I'm going to take away your guns." Didn't see much from after that, did we?
Is that what he said specifically? I don't remember.
He literally said that.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's obviously a stupid, might seem somewhat of a stupid thing to say in the United States. However, again, I'll reiterate the point. You have to be for something. So, do we sit here and think that guns should be legal in the United States? I don't know. You two may. I mean, Rami, you may think that guns should be legal in the United States.
Yeah.
I, at the very least, think there needs to be overwhelming gun law reform in the US.
But it's not easy to get a gun, though. I think that there's this message that anybody can walk in and get a gun, but it's really not that easy.
It's pretty easy if you go to, I mean, the sorts of markets where guns are sold, stalls where guns are sold, and you can buy a gun without even having all you have to have is a driving license.
There are still weights and checks, even in state fairs and things like that.
Compared to other countries where there are guns available, it's incredibly easy, is it not?
Yeah, it's certainly easier, but that's because America is probably one of the most gun-loving countries out there. Sure, every other country has made it difficult to own guns. Yet if we look at the statistics from gun violence and gun deaths, they're very small in comparison to overall deaths and violence issues out there. I think the gun issue has definitely been blown up out of proportion more than it actually is
Bad choice of
an
words.
issue.
You
Okay,
still,
yeah.
you still have, far more mass shootings than most other nations in the world. You have, fairly regularly now we see school shootings occurring, even though there are gun deaths. It doesn't negate the fact that there are more deaths by guns than in other countries around the world, right? So you want to target the issue there and look at why there are so many gun deaths and then deal with those issues. If you have tighter legislation on guns, you make it more difficult for people to kill people with guns.
People are going to find a way to get a gun. Drugs are illegal. People still find a way, don't they?
Yeah, but so you legislate.
Illegal, but...
So you legislate effectively to make it.
You can have all the rules in the world. I mean, I'm sure in the UK, if I wanted to go out and buy a gun, I could find somewhere to buy a gun.
Yeah, of course, but you make it more and more difficult for people to be able to do that, don't you?
If people are going to want to cause harm, they're going to cause harm. I mean, look at the UK. We don't have gun deaths, but we have knife crimes.
Yeah, so you enforce policy to lower the deaths by knife crime. You look at why so many knife crimes are occurring, and then you enforce policy to tackle why those knife crimes are occurring.
Then you've literally just solved the issue with gun violence. Then we need to address why there are mass shootings and things like that. I mean, have a look at all the suicides. A lot of gun deaths, I think the majority are through suicides. In terms of actual violent crimes and homicides, the actual share is quite low. So perhaps the issue then is just with like knife violence is addressing the mental health issues and community support in these areas.
Okay,
that's an issue we need to.
I'm sure we
can
debate gun control all day.
Yeah, let's agree to disagree on gun control and come back to the election. So, Rami, another thing I know that you're passionate about is third parties and third parties in the United States specifically. Historically, maybe not historically, but an incredibly poor turnout for third parties this election, especially when you compare it to the previous election. In 2016, the Green Party got 1.4 million votes, and the Libertarian Party 4.4 million votes. In 2020, the Green Party got 350,000 votes, and the Libertarian Party 1.7 million votes. So do you think third parties can have any kind of influence or any kind of impact, or major influence or major impact, without some kind of electoral reform?
Really,
absolutely. Not in the US system as it stands. Oh.
No, go, Rami, go ahead.
No, I think this is where people make a big mistake. American politics and the American Constitution sets up that there is very limited power in any form of government, whether it's federal, national, state. There is a lot more power dispersed. Unlike the UK, where all the power comes from Parliament, our local governments and things like that have barely any power, and this is where third parties need to look for if they want to gain support, is local elections, which libertarians and other parties have done very well in this election. They have picked up seats, even if it's really, really small seats in councils, in mayors, in all these smaller seats in the state legislatures. It's starting at the bottom. I think going to the top and going for presidency is nice. It definitely gets you recognition. And definitely pushes forward support in certain issues and certain candidates, and increases awareness. But if they really want to make change, then going local is the way that needs to go, and build up from there, because a lot of power is based on local.
Yeah. So you raise a good point. Yes, they can go local and then build up from there, and that's great. But it doesn't make a difference to the overall national picture. So third parties in the US, when they made a difference nationally, is essentially when they've used their platform to pretty much split the vote. So let's look at the last time a third party had a real impact with Ross Perot back in '92 and '96. I'd say he's probably one of the biggest reasons that George H.W. Bush lost re-election, because he was able to split a lot of that Republican vote and let Bill Clinton in. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a third party, but that's essentially where their influence is, being able to take a lot from one side and a little bit from another. Third parties have historically not done well. If you want to go even further back, let's have a look at what I think was, I want to say 1912, and you have William Howard Taft running for re-election as a Republican. You've got what's his name? Wilson running for the first time as a Democrat, and then you've got Theodore Roosevelt coming back after he's finished his after he's already done a term and a half as president, and he come back and campaigned independent, and he split the vote and let the Democrats win. That's essentially all they can do really right now. There'd have to be a change in the system if they ever wanted to have a grasp on power, have any Senate, House seats, or even the presidency.
Is that something you'd like to see then? Sorry, Rami. Is that something you'd like to see that third parties can have more of an influence? Because I think a lot of people look over to the United States and the sort of two-party system, the really entrenched two-party system that they have, and we can sit here all day and have debates on multiple different issues, some of which, you know, we'd all describe ourselves as having different ideologies, some of which we're going to agree with, some of which we're going to disagree on. It seems very bizarre to have just two parties and just a two-party system. So is electoral reform something that you'd like to see so other parties can have more of an influence?
It depends. So here in the UK, we've got the parliamentary system, which not completely, but does allow for third parties to have a platform. It allows for the Lib Dems to have their platform, where they once had about 50 seats. He has until they sort of tanked, and then you have the SNP, which dominates Scottish politics, was the parliamentary system. So yeah, I think it's possible. The answer is something I don't have, but whilst I'm talking, I'd just like to point you to a tweet Donald Trump just made 20 minutes ago, where he just says that Mark Esper, his defense secretary, has now been terminated.
Terminated?
Yes.
What the hell? It's a bit ominous.
No, interesting choice of words.
Yeah, something we haven't really touched on. So let's come to that in a second. Ryan, again, thanks so much for your questions, Ryan. Ryan says, whilst local is the way to boost third-party chances, is electoral reform the key to distancing our democracies from a two-party system? And I would certainly think so. I'll come back to something you just kind of alluded to, George. Whilst maybe third parties or fourth parties or fifth parties in this country can have more of an influence, we still don't have a fair, and I would even say democratic system. We don't have a representative system. You look back to, I believe, the 2015 election, and like them or not, this is the example I always use, UKIP with the third largest share of the votes, yet they got one seat. And if you're a proponent of democracy, that can't be something that you're in favour of. I personally,
it depends what you want the purpose of the UK Parliament to be. Do you want it to be something that represents collections of people, or do you want it to represent the people as a whole?
It needs to be representative of the population that votes for the parties. How can it be a fair and representative system if the party that has the third amount of votes as a whole has the power of one vote in Parliament, in the legislature? That doesn't to me represent a fair system.
Parliament is built in representing communities, in my mind, and that's how it works. So here in Dartford, we have a Conservative majority, so we have a Conservative MP.
Yeah, and which is why I would say we need electoral reform, because that doesn't properly reflect the country. Rami, what do you think?
I was going to say, I think the issue with democracy is there is no single perfect system of governance. Sure. I mean, look at Germany. Germany is a classic example of proportional representation, which is, sounds brilliant in concept, but it gives less of a mandate to the individual government in power, if they even manage to get a majority. So it's tough, because in one way it's good. Yeah, absolutely, everybody gets their fair share, but then do we have a weaker form of government where we're not able to push forward specific legislation? It's difficult.
Yeah.
But I think something definitely does need to happen.
He said, here's problem with democracy.
Yeah, Rami's a proponent of the authoritarian model. So let's before we have to wrap up, let's just quickly cover sort of Donald Trump's response, because I guess a massive part of the entire election that we haven't really covered today, because there's been so much to talk about, has been Donald Trump declaring victory before all of the votes were even counted, and then continuing after the votes have been counted to declare that he actually has won the election in what I would deem as an authoritarian move, an authoritarian grab for power. What do you make of that?
My position on this is very basic. obviously the international community has now recognised President-elect Joe Biden. Until he can produce evidence that there was voter fraud, Joe Biden is the president-elect, whether we like it or not. So, shut up or shut up, I suppose.
Rami?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, Trump has always been known to kind of be a little bit out there, but I think some of the stuff he's been coming up with the last week have just been just borderline crazy, really.
Yeah.
You know, I thought he was going to be
Prove
a
it.
little you know, I thought it was going to be a little bit more tame, you know, and maybe have a little bit more of a strategy in place in terms of actually kind of going forward and saying, right, no, we want recounts, we want this, we want that, you know, we want better scrutiny of, you know, votes and things. But he just went 0 to 100. And I think that helped shoot himself in the foot massively from the rest of the population, who just thought he was just crazy, you know, saying that there's mass fraud going on. And he was just blatantly spewing out any old rubbish that would pretty much get him attention. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues, is that he just sounds like an absolute crazy man, rather than actually putting forward a rational argument for why he believes that this result is good or this result is bad. But yeah, calling the election early and calling mass fraud, I think, was just a real big shot in the foot.
I mean, it's completely possible, though unlikely, that there could have been voter fraud. You have to allow it to be an investigation and not just try and invalidate the entire election.
And as you say, you know, put forward some bloody evidence that this was going on a massive scale, and that it was orchestrated and organized by the Democratic Party. Don't just spew out any nonsense that comes to your head because you want attention. You're sad because you've lost the election. I'm not surprised that he has done what he's done. I said on election night before, or right at the start of our coverage, that I thought that this was going to happen, that he was going to, you know, this red mirage effect was going to occur where loads of votes would be counted for the Republicans and he was going to declare victory early. I'm not surprised. Did you two see the press conference that was held by Rudy Giuliani that was supposed to be at the Four Seasons Hotel that was actually booked in at Four Seasons Landscaping? Did you catch that?
I did.
I thought it beautifully epitomized the entire Trump campaign, the team, the reign. I thought it was such a lovely ending to what has been a really crazy chapter in our history.
It's funny that you think it's over.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, fair point.
I think there was It's an Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode like that, wasn't there? Pretty much that exact same scenario. I think so, yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, brilliant. Just George, what did you make of Dominic Raab struggled to sort of say on Saturday and Sunday that all of the votes should be.
The election hadn't been. Well, it was before Saturday and Sunday, I believe. But when he was asked about it, the election hadn't been called yet, so it isn't up to him to. He was
asked what he made of the allegations of voter fraud and whether he thought that all the votes should be counted, and what he made of Donald Trump declaring an early victory, and didn't answer those questions.
I think it would be a bit improper for a foreign secretary to impose on the United States like that.
What, to say all the votes should be counted?
Well, no, it's not our system unless we think that Donald Trump really isn't going to yield power. Then we could probably get involved, but we haven't got to that point yet. Like from what I've heard behind the scenes, Trump's team is actually working with Biden's team for a handover.
Yeah, let's hope so, and let's hope it's peaceful, and let's hope that you know, it seems so far that everything's remained relatively calm, apart from the, you know, Trump campaign spouting off lots of nonsense. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time this evening. It's been really great to get into some debate and discussion with you guys. Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tune in next week where we'll have some more great guests and we'll be able to catch up on all of the week's current events. But until then, we'll bid you goodbye and see you soon. Thanks for joining me, guys. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
See you later. Thanks for having us.